subsequently come to any type of understanding about why the president's change of heart?
No, I don't know that it's nefarious. I don't know that it's innocent. I think all sorts of things are possible. I've never gotten an explanation. Again, it may be that someone decided we just want everyone out. There was a lot of talk of this nonsensical idea of the deep state. You know, the other thing people forget, and Sally knows this, it is true that U.S. attorneys leave when a new administration comes in, but they're not asked to vacate the premises by midnight that day. And you would presume if they are, that then replacements are in the office. There's still not a replacement, who is nominated for my position. And that was, 6 or 7 months ago. So that's unusual.
Now, Sally, at least you had the good fortune of knowing why your departure happened. Can you walk us through what happened to you?
Funny, I never really thought about that in a good fortune kind of way, but it's good to have a rosy view of that. Well, actually, it's a long-standing tradition at DOJ for the Deputy Attorney General to stay on as the acting Attorney General between administrations. And it's really important for there to be continuity in all of the agencies, but it's really particularly essential at DOJ. And so I agreed to stay on. I had been deputy, agreed to stay on as acting AG until President Trump's nominee, Jeff Sessions, was confirmed. And sort of the deal on this is that it's supposed to be an uneventful time. Sort of the understanding is that everything stays status quo, that Obama-era policies don't change, we don't change positions on cases, and likewise, that I wouldn't go out and haul off and initiate new policies during that interim time as well. And in fact, I remember my chief of staff had told me, this was going to be so low-key, so uneventful, I would have time for, in her words, a lot of long, boozy lunches. Well, that didn't exactly happen. It was not an uneventful time. I was actually in the car late Friday afternoon on my way on the 27th to go back to Atlanta, my hometown of Atlanta, for an event that weekend, when I got a call from my principal deputy. I was able to keep one assistant with me during this interim time. All of the other political appointees changed over to Trump appointees then. So I get a call from Matt after I've left the office on the way to the airport saying, "You're not going to believe this, but I was just on the New York Times website, and it looks like President Trump has issued some sort of travel ban." That was how we found out about it at DOJ after the executive order was issued, was by my deputy reading about it on the New York Times website. And this was particularly troubling given that I had been sitting in the White House counsel's office at the White House just like an hour and a half before that, talking about now what's publicly known as the Mike Flynn situation during that time. So we spent the weekend trying to get our arms around what is this thing and what are they trying to accomplish with it. I remember I'm on the plane on my iPad, literally going online, trying to find a copy of the executive order so we would understand what it was that I was going to have lawyers in court the very next morning, Saturday morning, defending. Because there were going to be challenges with people who were arriving here in the country and not permitted in. And so I issued a directive then that over the course of the weekend that people could defend, our lawyers could defend on procedural grounds only, but that we weren't going to take a position yet on the constitutionality of the order until we knew whether we believed it was constitutional.
And had you any directive or communication from the White House in the overnight period on what you should be doing, how you should be handling this?
Nothing.
You were just flying on what the
radio
job is?
silent.
Okay.
At this point, yeah. So we go through it, and at that time, the executive order, this was Travel Ban 1 and the early stages of Travel Ban 1. So when I made the decision that I did, for example, it actually applied to green card holders, lawful permanent residents. It applied to people who had valid visas. Literally, if they had left the country, they were being turned away and not being let back into the country at this point. And so first thing Monday morning after we've gone through and I've been reading challenges over the weekend, I gathered all of the folks at DOJ that would be responsible for defending this. And that included our career lawyers as well as all of the Trump appointees from the various divisions that were involved in this. And, I asked them sort of, tell me the best argument why this is constitutional. And I can't disclose, obviously, what the internal discussions were within DOJ, but I can tell you that at the end of that discussion, I was not satisfied that the travel ban was lawful or constitutional. And I also thought it was antithetical to a very cornerstone of our country, the concept of religious freedom. And so at that point, sort of the decision for me was, well, do I resign now?
Right.
Or do I direct the Department of Justice not to defend this executive order that I was not convinced was lawful or constitutional? And not just about some arcane statute, but about a core principle of our country. And I went back and forth on that some in my head. This is all happening in lightning pace. This is Monday morning. I'm now sort of midday Monday.
Yeah.
And am sort of struggling back and forth with the resign or direct. And, I guess sort of the bottom line on that is that I felt like resignation would have protected my personal integrity, but it would not have protected the integrity of the Department of Justice. And I thought back to my confirmation hearing when there were several senators there that asked me to pledge that if the president asked me to do something that was unlawful
Right.
or unconstitutional, that I would say no. They didn't say, will you resign if the president does that? They asked, will you say no? And so I felt like I needed to do my job. And in this instance, that meant directing the Department of Justice not to defend the travel ban.
And so how did the And so can the White House response to this be measured in seconds, minutes, or hours?
It was hours. Well, their response was pretty quick, but in terms of the ultimate action there.
Right.
And,
Well, what did you hear first?
They weren't happy.
Yeah.
I understand that. But, had they consulted with us in advance, I think they could have understood what the concerns were. And that was also one of the concerns that I had here for an executive order that was ostensibly about national security. None of the national security agencies had been consulted about.
Did you give them a heads up about what you were going to do?
Yes, they had a heads up about that. And then within a few hours later that evening, 9-ish or so that night, they hand-delivered a letter to me telling me that the president had removed me.
Well,
apparently, they tried to do it by email, I'm told. I found this out later. They tried to do it by email, but the email kept bouncing back, which that's sort of like breaking up with somebody by text or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it hurts, let me tell you. I mean,
Do you want to share something, Brian?
should we talk about this?
no, that next year.
Okay.
Did you, what literally